And we are live with the 220-1101 study group. It's the pre-show, everybody. We've got 10 minutes before we get started. I'm just sort of collecting my thoughts, making sure cameras are working. Those look good. We are not recording. Look at that. We're not recording locally. See? You caught me. Let's turn on recording 1, and let's turn on recording number 2. You know, I did not do my podcast intro. What have I been doing? Let's do it real quick. Got it right here, as if I can't remember it. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer 220-1101 Core 1A Plus study group. This study group was recorded on September 10th, 2022. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer 220-1101 Core 1A Plus Study Group After Show. This after show was recorded on September 10th, 2022. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. Well, that covers the script. That was probably the most exciting part of my day. Not really, but it was up there. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. It's a Saturday. Can you believe it? Can you believe we're doing a Saturday study group again? It's not like we used to always do Saturday study groups. It used to be the normal study group was on a Saturday because I worked a normal job Monday through Friday. And so I would always leave Saturdays for study groups. Like every Saturday, we'd have a study group. And then I just started doing this full time, and I could do study groups throughout the week. Well, now, because of the chaos that is my life, I am now doing a study group on a Saturday. So here we are. And then we're doing one 2 days from now. We're doing one on Monday. So it's almost back to back. I almost said I've got Sunday off, which in my head was very, very funny. Probably not to you, but it was very funny to me. And because I have a lot of things to do tomorrow. And then we'll do one on Monday. Then we're back to let's do one during the week kind of thing. So we'll see how this goes. Thanks for being your chat room. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming in on the weekend. It's always good to have you here. We got a lot going on. Hello, Bradenton and Northwest Houston and St. Paul and bunch of stuff. Is the 1001 retired? Not yet. It is hanging on there until October the 20th. October the 20th will be the last day for the 1001 and 1002 exams. We'll talk more about that at the beginning of the study group, but there's a logistical thing, right? We have to figure out which one we're going to study for. We will figure it out. In the chat room, Nevi says, passed my Core 1 1101 exam last week. Congratulations. I guess now we're working on that Core 2. That'll be the next one. But I think you picked the right series. Now you've got plenty of time to study for your Core 2. You're not going to be pushed by that October 20th date. You can just sort of relax your way into the studies, which I think is a better way to go about doing it. Okay. J.A. says, just went through your course for 1101, Core 1, currently going over 1102. Well, pick one at a time. Let's not go crazy here. Stick one exam, pass that exam, then you can shift gears to the other one. What happens if you don't make the test before October? Well, you have to start all over again with the 1100 series. So that's why. You can't mix and match. You can't do like a 1001 and an 1102. That won't work. So that's the way we do it. We will get there in just a moment. Let's check now. We now have recordings going. You can see my Cylons down here are running. They weren't running originally, which means you got to see something that wasn't recorded. I'm trying never to make that happen, but one never knows. Hello, Tacoma, Washington. We got lots going on. Taking my Core 2 September 26th. Well, that's not too bad if you've already got the Core 1 done. You've got, another month there. Well, 3/4 of a month after that if you had to reset. The problem is that if you fail once, you can take the next exam immediately if you wanted to. But if you fail the second time, there's a 2-week delay. You can't take it in that 2-week time frame. this may fit into your schedule. This may be an important thing to consider for your schedule. So think about that. Did you say to do Core 1 before Core 2? Well, you can do them in either order, but do them one at a time. So if you want to do Core 2 first, feel free. Be my guest. But only do Core 2. Study for Core 2. Pass the name for Core 2. Pass that exam. Then you can shift gears back to Core 1. Or do it in the other direction. Do Core 1 and then Core 2. Will you have the same exam objective as 1100 listed like you will with the 1000 series? I don't have really plans at the moment. They're so similar in structure that there really isn't confusion about what's on the exam. They're practically the same. The only difference is really the details of the content. We will get here in just a moment. We got lots to go through to be able to see that. All right, we got 4 minutes to go. That looks good. How much of a difference is the 1100 series? Quite a bit. Quite a bit of difference. There are probably, it's probably about 30% different, 25 to 30% different for Core 1. And we can pull up the numbers and look at the details. And about 40% is new on the Core 2. So there's a lot that's changed. You do not want to study from old materials and go take the new exam. That's for sure. That's just a bad idea. Do not do that. Make sure all your study materials match the version of the exam that you're going to take, as always. All right, we got about 3.5 minutes to go. We'll get through this. It's really coming down to the wire. Now, there will be people taking their 220-1002 exam on the very last day it's available, on October the 20th. That part is a universal truth. It always happens that way. So if you're one of those people, you're probably in a very large group planning to get there because it's human nature, I guess. We pay our taxes on the last day. We always get to the deadline on the last day. We finally get our test done on the last day. I don't know why we do that. Probably not the best idea, but we do it anyway. I can only recommend that you do not do that. And then everyone does that. So that's the nature of the beast, I believe. Okay. We got a lot here. I need to get lighting looks good. We're recording cameras. Yep, I think we're almost ready. I've got a set of questions that I did recently, except I don't remember them, so they'll all be new for all of us. This is the beauty of it, I guess. We'll put that right there. Can I pay and take the test the same day? I guess if there is a seat available at a testing center, or if there is an opening available online, you certainly could. You certainly could take it the same day. Yeah, no coffee today. More of an iced drink today. That's the way it works. Okay, we got a minute and a half. We'll get things going here. This is the pre-show. For those of you that are checking in and wondering, why are we looking at the back of the studio? Well, that's because we haven't started yet. Soon we'll start, and you'll see me, and we'll be like this, and it'll be fine. Don't worry. We'll get there in just a moment. We'll have everything that's there. I could probably pause my graphic here. That looks good. If I were to go for a remote help desk tech support job, would A+ cert be sufficient? Well, if the employer would like you to have one, then yes, it would be. I think the skills you learn with A+ would help you quite a bit, whether an employer's looking for it or not. Do I watch football? If so, what team do I follow? I don't watch any football. I used to watch quite a bit of football and sports and those types of things. I just don't have time, because when you're writing a book or you're creating videos or you're creating more content, you really can't have a lot of other things happening externally. And football just takes up a huge amount of time. It's like 4 and 5 hours for one game. Well, I can do a lot in 4 and 5 hours. I can build a whole chapter of a book in 4 or 5 hours. So that's why I generally just spend my time in here, and I just don't have time for those. Maybe someday things will slow down. I don't think that will ever be the case. Things will slow down and I can watch some sports ball again. But until then, I think we're okay. I think I'm all right. Hopefully you can appreciate that too. It's top of the hour, everybody. I think we should now try to do a live stream. Lower third looks good. These look fantastic. It's time to start the show, everybody. As soon as I get 3 buttons pushed on my side, finally. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2022 Professor Messer 220-1101 A+ study group. This is our monthly study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and hopefully you will have some answers. We'll go through all of those answers. We'll look at what was right. We'll look at what was wrong. We'll tear each question apart and try to figure out the differences. And maybe in the meantime, we've learned a little something along the way. Thanks for joining us. For those of you that are here live, we're doing a Rare Saturday study group. For those of you watching on the replay, that part really doesn't matter so much for you, but it's something we always sort of keep in mind when we're working through all of these different pieces. If you are here live, we would love for you to be able to join along and answer the questions online. You can do that by popping open a new browser window and browsing over to this link. That link is professormesser.com/QA. That is the QA link. There's also an app that you can download for your mobile device. It is called the Socrative Student app. You don't want the Socrative Teacher app. That's the one for me. You want the Socrative Student app. And if you use that app, it will ask you for a room name. The room name, no surprise, is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Now, if you do that, there will be a question waiting for you on that page. We call this our rewind question because it's really a question from last month that I like to use to see how much maybe we remember from last month and to make sure that you're able to get in and answer questions properly. That question that you will see asks, a single drive in a 4-drive NAS has failed and the data is no longer accessible from the network. Which of the following would best describe this array? Would it be RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 1 plus 0, or RAID 5? And the way you answer that is use the link that's right there on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will come back to this question in just a moment to see how well you remember that RAID question from last month. Well, thank you for being here on a weekend. You're joining us on a Saturday. Thanks for being here. Of course, when we are not here live, we're always online, hanging out behind the scenes. You can, of course, follow us on YouTube by visiting professormesser.com/YouTube. And don't forget about our daily A+ pop quiz questions. I just wrote a bunch of new ones this morning. You can always find those every day on Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter, and professormesser.com/Instagram. Always two good places to go if you would like to participate and answer any of those questions. There is also continuing education unit credit if you already have your A+ certification. I'll describe somewhere in this first hour the process that you can use for earning a CEU, specifically a webinar category CEU. We'll talk more about that as we step through it, but listen in sometime during this first hour for more details on that. I want to thank Trey in the chat room with the $1.99 super chat. Trey says, finished my A+ Cert 1000 series today. It wasn't even close, Trey. You were absolutely there getting your 1000 series A+ Cert done, but well before the October 20th deadline. So congratulations to you, and thanks also for your support and for the super chat. For those of you not familiar what I'm talking about, let's describe the current situation for the A+ exams, because there are different series of A+ exams that are currently available. The one that's been around since January the 15th of 2019 is called the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. Those describe the two exams that you have to take to earn your A+ certification. These exams retire on October the 20th. So as we sit here at the very beginning of September now, really we're sort of into September, we've got about a month or so before these exams go away completely for that older version. So if you've been studying for your 1001 or you've been studying for your 1002, it's time to get it done. It's time to go get those exams finished, because if you don't pass both of these before that October 20th deadline, you have to start all the way over again with the new series. That's an important consideration. It's 2 exams, 90 minutes per exam. The 220 1001, you need to earn a 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. And the 220 1002, you need a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. Now, even though the exams retire, if you are able to pass both of them before October the 20th, you are certified for 3 years. So there is a little bit of a benefit to getting this locked in. There's a lot of study materials on the market, and so I imagine that's why many of you are working towards this specific version. Now, there is also another version of the A+ exam available. Both of these are the newer versions called the 220 1101 and the 220 1102. These were released on April the 20th of 2022, a number of months ago, which means we probably won't see these retired until somewhere around November of 2025. The exams are exactly the same length, the exact amount of time, and the exact grading it's the same. The 1101 is a 675 and the 1102 is a 700. So my objective for you is to make sure that you're familiar with both of these versions. And if you are just starting your studies and you're looking at your study materials and they are not for the 1101 or 1102, you may want to rethink that, because you've literally only got like a month and 10 days left before the older exam goes away. So if you're studying for the newer exam, you don't have this deadline. You don't have to worry about this deadline pushing you and pushing you. And quite honestly, it takes really a couple of months just to complete one of these. That means you would probably need about 4 months on average to complete both of these. Well, you got a month and 10 days. So you can see now it's a physics problem. It's a time motion study. There's no way to cram all of that time into the short period that you have left for that older version. So if you are just getting started, make sure that all of your materials are specifically written for the 220 1101 and 220 1102. Pretty important. So make sure you are familiar with that. That's an important consideration. Now, if you look at the way the exams are structured, they look identical. In fact, they have the same domain names. They've got the same details within the domains. There's very little that has changed, but there are a number of things that have been removed, and there are a number of things that have been added to both exams. So you really can't use older materials for these newer exams. You do have to purchase new materials if you are going to take the new exams. That's very important. You never want to walk into this exam having studied the wrong materials. That would be a bad situation. We've also got these study groups to maybe help you along with this process. We have a number of study groups in our archive going back a number of months for this newer exam. And of course, we go back years for the older exam, so you've got plenty of study materials to pull from. There are also replays of this study group available immediately afterwards on YouTube. I also have a podcast version of this, so you can add it to your podcast listening program. You can find that at professormesser.com/podcast. And on the YouTube side, make sure you check in about a day or two after. My marketing manager, Lori, goes through this entire presentation. Hi, Lori. She's watching the replay right now, hopefully at 2x speed, and she's putting in all the timestamps so you can find exactly what you're looking for in the YouTube video description. Have a look at all of our videos online. You'll see YouTube video descriptions for all of our study groups. Maybe that can help you find things just a little bit faster. When we're not here live and doing a live stream, we're live and chatting on Discord. So you can join us at professormesser.com/Discord. Myself and a number of others that are studying for their exams like to hang out there. If you have questions about a topic, a technology, you've got a question about something you may have read, it's a great place to bounce some ideas off others who might be studying the same thing. You can also find a link to the Discord in the upper right of my website. It's very useful to be able to have that. So this is a pretty important part of what we're doing. This ability for you to find what you need as quickly as possible. You'll certainly find it there online. Eventually, you're going to need to take your A+ exam. And of course, you could pay full price for your vouchers by going to the Pearson VUE website, but I would highly recommend that you have a look at some of the discounted vouchers that are on our website. It's the same voucher. There's nothing different except it costs you less money. You can find it at professormesser.com/vouchers. These are available for folks in the U.S., U.S. territories, or Canada. Unfortunately, I don't have vouchers available for other parts of the world quite yet. If you do purchase the voucher on my website, I'll give you more than just a voucher. You'll get a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This has a list of exam hacks, sort of life hacks for an exam that can help you with your studies. It can help you while you're in the exam, perhaps even get a couple of extra points out of the exam. And if things don't go well, we give you some tips for how to turn this around and do it one more time. So that would be pretty good. The idea behind this is that you don't need a code, you don't need a coupon, you don't have to add some type of extension to your browser. They're just all discounted. So it's an easy way to pay for your voucher, but spend a little bit less money than buying it directly from Pearson VUE. Find it at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier. A single drive and a 4-drive NAS has failed, and the data is no longer accessible from the network. Which of the following would best describe this array? Would it be RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 1 plus 0, or RAID 5? And we have done much better this month. Almost 70% of you say it's RAID 0 is the one that would have caused this outage of data. And you'd be absolutely correct, because RAID 1 is mirroring. It would not lose data if we lost a drive. RAID 1 plus 0 is a combination of mirroring and striping. It would not lose data if we lost one drive. And RAID 5 is striping and parity. So that's one that would not lose any type of data either if we lost a single drive. In that case, RAID 0 is the only one that would not provide us with redundancy. That's why we often say that RAID 0 is zero redundancy. If you do lose a drive from a RAID 0 array, then you will need to replace the bad drive and restore everything from your backup. You do have a backup, don't you? Of course you do. We've all been through that one and trying to figure out the details. There is a chart that's in my video on troubleshooting storage devices where I do talk about how many drives is necessary for a particular RAID type and what happens if you lose one of those drives on that particular RAID type. So that might help you as well. That's in your 1101 section 5.3 troubleshooting storage devices. I think you did pretty well considering what our numbers were last month. You've greatly improved to this month. I think that's a good place to start. Let's do some other questions. Everything from this point forward are brand new questions. You've never seen them before. And in fact, the question that we like to start with our new questions is not a multiple choice based question. Now, the one we just looked at was a question with multiple choices available. But there are questions at the very beginning of your A+ exam that are what CompTIA calls performance-based questions, PBQs. Performance-based questions are questions that are really anything but multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. They could be matching questions. They could be drag and drop questions. There's so many different things they could present to you. So what I've created for you today, a little bit more difficult because it's a fill in the blank. And we know fill in the blank, I'm not giving you any hints on this one. We've really got to pull it right out of our brain to be able to figure this out. So let's go through our performance-based question of the month, which asks, list the protocol, TCP or UDP, and the port number for these 5 different descriptions. So the first description is, an alert is received from a network switch. What protocol and port number would be associated with that? The next is, email messages are sent from a desktop app. The third is, a document is sent to a Windows print server. The fourth is, all terminal communication is encrypted. And the last is, the IP address of www.professormesser.com is 172.67.41.114. Those are your 5 descriptions of, I don't know what to call them, data flows, data types, descriptions of an app. They could be a number of different things, but we're looking for the protocol and the port number. Folks in the chat room already not happy with the fill in the blank for the port number, I think this is a good way to memorize it. Have a look at those. Let's go through them one more time for those of you on the podcast side. An alert is received from a network switch. Email messages are sent from a desktop app. A document is sent to a Windows print server. All terminal communication is encrypted. And the IP address of www.professormesser.com is 172.67.41.114. That's a real IP address right there. Pulled it right out of there and stuck it in the question. What I'd like you to be able to do is for each one of these, tell me the protocol and the port number. So we can start with the protocols, a TCP or UDP. Let's figure that part out. And I realize the CompTIA exam objectives don't specifically mention TCP or UDP. They really just have port numbers. But for someone who's in the industry and has worked with these for so many years, they're really tied together. You really need to know both. They're pretty important that you understand, is the protocol TCP or is the protocol UDP? So make sure that you're at least familiar with some of those. Now, fortunately, that should be relatively easy if you remember everything that we've been talking about with port numbers. Have a look at this. If you think you know the answer, follow that link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in what you think it is. Just type in A, B, C, D, and E, and then put what you think the port numbers are for each one of those right afterwards. This should be a pretty good one to go through. It's one, notice there's no matching here. I almost made this matching, but I thought, oh, that's just too easy. It's just too simple. So we're not going to do a matching. I'm going to do a fill in the blank, and probably next month I'll be smarter than this and give you a matching. We'll see how this goes. We don't know. It's kind of hard to compile this because it's a fill in the blank, so I can't automatically compile how many got right, how many got wrong. I have to go look at it later. But we'll figure that piece out as we step through it. List those protocols on your screen. I'm seeing a number of answers slowly coming in. No, obviously you're not going to be able to Google this. I just wrote it a number of days ago. So this doesn't exist over on the Google. You instead want to go directly to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. It's got to be one of these, right? This should be pretty good. Now, if you're not familiar with these port numbers, they are all listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. So make sure you go through the objectives and you understand what all of them might be. Another tip I'll give you is CompTIA rarely goes outside the scope of the objectives. In fact, it's so rare that you really shouldn't even bother with anything that goes outside the objectives. If you know everything that's listed in the objectives, you're going to pass your exam just fine. So stick to the objectives. That also means there's a small list of port numbers relative to all of the ones you could, I guess, possibly memorize in the world. This is not, well, you don't have to memorize 65,000 port numbers, which is how many there are. Well, that's not true. There's 65,536 for TCP and another 65,000 for UDP. So you don't want to be in that situation where you're trying to memorize 120,000 different port numbers. That's not the point of this. The point is to memorize the most used or the most common port numbers that you will see. And fortunately, there's a relatively small list when you look at it from that perspective. Let's see how we did with this question. Let's step through each one of these to see how we may have either answered right or wrong. And there may be some of these. Are there some of these I could maybe put multiple ports in? I don't think so. I think I narrowed it down to a single one. So let's start with the first one. A, an alert is received from a network switch. Well, if you're familiar with monitoring infrastructure devices, querying devices, and getting statistics from those devices, or receiving an alert, or what this particular protocol calls a trap, then you would be using SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol, and it communicates over UDP port 162. A little bit different than doing a query with SNMP, where you are proactively getting statistics from a device. An alert or a trap is more proactive. It tells you when these problems have occurred, and it does that by using UDP port 162. Next on our list is email messages are sent from a desktop app. This is very common if you're using an email client or using an application that communicates using some type of very common email method for sending emails. And that's the important part of this one, is it says email messages are sent from a desktop app, that means we must be using the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP, which sounds a lot like SNMP, but it is not. It's different. It is SMTP, and SMTP communicates by default over TCP port 25. At least the non-secure version of SMTP communicates over TCP port 25. Next on our list, a document is sent to a Windows print server. Well, that's interesting. Now, if you've ever communicated to a Windows print server, you know there's a lot that happens behind the scenes with Windows, but this uses the same protocol that is used to transfer files in Windows, which means we'd be using SMB, the server message block, and by default, SMB uses TCP port 445. That is really an important protocol. In fact, if you're a Windows user, this is probably one of the most popular protocols you will use, especially if you're sharing files from a Windows share, you're sending files to a printer, or almost anything else that happens behind the scenes in Windows. It uses SMB server message block. Fourth on our list, question D is all terminal communication is encrypted. You all got this one right, didn't you? It would not be Telnet, it would be SSH, Secure Shell, uses TCP port 22. We know that TCP port 22 SSH, probably one of the most common ways to communicate securely using a terminal. I was just using an SSH client this morning. If you're doing anything to a remote device using that terminal, you're using TCP port 22 for SSH or Secure Shell. And last on our list is the IP address of www.professormesser.com is 172.67.41.114. That is one of the many different IP addresses associated with my website. And we're able to make the determination or conversion, or what they call resolution, between a fully qualified domain name, such as professormesser.com, and we resolve it to a particular IP address, which is 172.67.41.114. That indeed is DNS, the domain name system, which generally communicates using UDP port 53. Those are the 5 different port numbers we were looking for. An alert received from a network switch is Simple Network Management Protocol TRAP at UDP 162. An email message sent from a desktop app is using the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, which uses TCP port 25. A document is sent to a Windows print server, that's SMB or server message block, using TCP port 445. All terminal communication encrypted is using Secure Shell or SSH over TCP port 22. And lastly, the IP address of www.professormesser.com is 172.67.41.114. The only way we would know that is if we were using the domain name system over UDP port 53. That is a lot of port numbers, and it's just 5 of them. That's and there's probably, another 10 or so on the CompTIA exam objectives. So we're really just beginning. If you got any of these wrong, or you were confused maybe about what some of these might be, then I would highly recommend you go back to the CompTIA exam objectives, make sure you list all of these out. And some of you in the chat room even mentioned I need to put that game back up on my site and make one that is specific for the 1101. I'll have to work on that over the next week or so. This would be a good one. Was the question mean? Probably so. I'll go with Scott in the chat room, who says it was a mean question. And probably in some ways it was a little intense, granted, because it was a fill in the blank. But this is one of the very good ways that hopefully you can remember what some of these are. I think when I started going through them and trying to figure out which ones do I put in this list, I had to make those decisions too about which ones are easy, which ones are hard, what should we do with them. So we'll have to see how we do going forward. But fortunately, we're now through our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully this is giving you some insight into some questions you might get on your exam, or maybe some things you can study to be ready for your 1101 exam. Let's shift gears back to a multiple choice based question, shall we? I've got one sitting here waiting for you. This question asks, a user in the shipping department can access their Windows desktop from a computer at their desk, from their tablet, or from their smartphone. Which of the following would best describe this scenario? Is it SaaS, PAAS, DAAS, or IAAS. A user in the shipping department can access their Windows desktop from a computer at their desk, from their tablet, or from their smartphone. Which of the following would best describe this scenario? Is it SAAS, PAAS, DAAS, or IAAS? If you think you know the answer, I guess it would be good if I put the link up. There it is, ProfessorMesser.com/QA. You can lock in your answer so you can tell me exactly which one of these would best describe the scenario. As always, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. That's much appreciated. Thank you so much. I also want to extend my thanks to Jacob in the chat room with the $20 super chat. Thank you, Jacob. Coming right off the top rope. Jacob says, "Hey, Professor, thanks for your videos and study groups. I passed my A+ 1101 exam. Now onward to the 1102. How about that? So we already got some folks already locking in their 1101s, and now you don't have to worry about rushing to that October 20th date. I think a lot of people, though, like the idea of that deadline. I think that drives a lot of people and gets them there. So if that works for you, that's fantastic. But if you've already now completed your 1101, now all you have to do is work towards that 1102. Congratulations on your 1101. You got through that very well. So now it's time to get that 1102 locked down. In a way, I almost think that by the time the 1002 retires, I think the 1102 may be even a better focused exam when it comes to Windows. I guess maybe because we're getting rid of a couple of versions of Windows. Now we're really focusing on just Windows 10 and Windows 11. So a little bit different than the existing 1002 to be able to have that there. Let's see how you did with this question. We'll shift gears back to this one, and it asks, a user in the shipping department can access their Windows desktop from a computer at their desk, from a tablet, or from their smartphone. Which of the following would best describe this scenario? Is it SAAS, PAAS, DAAS, IAAS? Let's see what you think. We are really torn on this one. Look at the distribution across all of these. 37% of you, if we go with the plurality of you, say it's a DAAS, as in Delta, Apple, Sierra. We've got SAAS at 34%. So I'm looking through these numbers and looking through the details of it. 34% have said it is software as a service. 20% say it's infrastructure as a service, and 10% of you say it's platform as a service. But this DAAS, what in the world am I talking about? DAAS. When we start getting into it, it is indeed desktop as a service. Desktop as a service is a way that you can access your desktop from almost any device you're using because your desktop lives in the cloud. This means that you could be anywhere in the world and get access to anything that you might have on your system, because your system simply exists out on a cloud-based service. This means that you can run an app on your smartphone and access your desktop. You can run an app on your tablet and access your desktop. You can go to your desktop at home and access your desktop at work. These are capabilities that we often start distributing out and doing things with. Sometimes if this is within our own organization where we're not using the cloud, we refer to this as VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. Virtual Desktop Infrastructure is something that you are using to be able to access these desktops. So let's take that VDI and let's stick it in the cloud. And once we do that, it's still VDI, but it's VDI in the cloud. And a quick, easy way to call it VDI in the cloud is to call it Desktop as a Service, DAAS, which is really what it is, because we don't have to maintain the equipment that our desktop is running on. We're purchasing and using some cloud-based service for that. So it really is a service. It's now a service that's maintaining our desktops with DAAS, or Desktop as a Service. This means that the operating system that we're using to access that service can really be almost anything. This is really useful if you ever get into the details of figuring out how could I access some of these features from wherever I happen to be. How can I get to my desktop from wherever I happen to be? desktop as a service. Great way to do that. In fact, that is the desktop I'm showing on my screen, is the Amazon Workspaces. So I literally went to Amazon. I said, spin up a Windows for me. And it said, okay, we're ready for you. You can click from your browser and access this. And that's what I got from my Mac. In fact, you'll notice this is a Mac front end on that desktop as a service. You can see the Mac title bar across the top there. But it's running Windows in that window, which is a very easy way for me to set up and run operating systems regardless of what I happen to have on my desktop or my tablet or my smartphone. Fantastic way to do it. So desktop as a service is what we were looking for. It works fantastic for the things you're looking for. We have these other types of services, such as 33% of you said software as a service. And indeed, I would say probably desktop as a service is a type of software as a service, but that wasn't the question. The question asked which of the following would best describe this scenario. So the best description really is desktop as a service, because software as a service not only includes things like desktop as a service, but many other types of software as well. It's a very broad term. 19% said infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is just the hardware. Sometimes that includes an operating system, but that means you have memory, network, storage, CPU, and maybe an OS. But that's it. Well, there's no desktop there. You can't access anything from a tablet. There's nothing to connect to from a smartphone. So it would not be infrastructure as a service. And we've got, really last on our list, PaaS, platform as a service. On my slides, you'll notice that I always show you that listed as a bunch of Legos, because that's really what platform as a service is. You log into a third-party cloud-based service. They have all these modules available, and then you as a application developer can put these modules together to create an application without having to rewrite everything from scratch. It's really a modular application, programming front end, if you want to use it that way. Platform as a service, 10% of you chose that one. The one that we were really looking for, though, was indeed DaaS, desktop as a service, and 38% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another one. I've got more here. We could break down and look at another question that I have available. This one's more of a troubleshooting question for those of you. This question asks, a user's computer operates normally for about an hour before abruptly powering off without any error message or warning. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it malware, overheating, damaged application, BIOS upgrade, or network outage? A user's computer operates normally for about an hour before abruptly powering off without any error message or warning. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it malware, overheating, damaged application, BIOS upgrade, or network outage? If you think you know the answer, follow this link that's right here on your screen. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See what you think this problem might be. Now we get to try our troubleshooting skills, which is obviously an important set of skills for the exam. There's an entire domain for troubleshooting. So make sure you're familiar. And many people in the chat room going, yep, that's happened to me. Yes, this has been a problem. Yes, I've run into that, and I have as well. I have absolutely run into this problem before. Hopefully you'll find your way around the path that gets you to what the actual correct answer might be. Try to give you a little bit more room there on the screen. There we go. This is one that if you're ever in a situation where you have to troubleshoot, this is the one we want to stick to. This is the set that we want to choose, that we want to be able to use. This one is the part I don't like about these problems is that they are so abrupt, which is why I wanted to make sure I put that into the question itself, where you're working along and then suddenly you're not working anymore. This is the real key. So if you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Let's see how we do with this question. You can always lock in your question by going to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Let's see how we do with this one. Let's see how you answered. Our question again asked, a user's computer operates normally for about an hour before abruptly powering off without any error message or warning. Which of the following is the most likely reason for this issue? Is it malware, overheating, damaged application, BIOS upgrade, or network outage? Let's see how you did. 83% of you say it's overheating. That is a pretty big percentage. Everything else, in fact, is single digits. 9% for malware, 6% for damaged application, 2% for BIOS upgrade, and 0% for network outage. So this is really an interesting one because it is so abrupt, because it happens so quickly. And this is something that's very indicative of a thermal issue. If you have a system gets hotter and hotter and hotter, suddenly it will turn itself off completely to avoid damaging any of the sensitive components that are on your motherboard or anywhere else inside of your case or laptop. This is one that becomes extremely useful. But even though it seems to you that it's powering off without any notice whatsoever, what you may find if you go into the event viewer, you may find that there is an entry just before it powered off that said, man, it's hot in here. I'm going to turn this off right now. So that if you go back into the event viewer, you can at least scroll up to the very last thing before your system restarted, and you may find some notices there referring to some type of thermal issue on your computer. Pretty important to remember. Intermittent shutdowns are almost always heat related. They don't have to be, but very common that they are heat related. It's the first thing I think of. It's the first thing you should have thought of when you were thinking about the troubleshooting process for this particular problem. And of course, this could be related to bad hardware as well. It doesn't have to be thermal. It could be that the motherboard itself has a short. The motherboard itself has a faulty component, and it's powering itself off that way. But that wasn't one of the options, though. So let's go back through these options that we had here and see if we can really reconcile this final answer. So if it is abruptly powering off without any error message or warning, 83% of us said overheating. I believe that's the correct answer. We're going to go with that as the correct answer. Now, 9% of you said malware. And although malware could cause your computer to power down, it would most likely be a normal power down process where you start to see certain windows disappear, then you see the Windows logo appear, and then your system shuts off. Now, that is not the problem we described here. The problem we described here is that it just abruptly powers down. So I think whenever you get into that situation and you're trying to figure out what could this be, you probably would not want to look at malware as being something that would abruptly completely power your system down. Malware doesn't quite have that level of hold on your operating system. 7% of you say it's a damaged application. Damaged applications tend to give some type of message on the screen with some type of error. Either that or the application itself just disappears, but it doesn't cause your entire computer to turn off. Do you imagine if every bad application caused your computer to power down? My computer would be constantly powering down. That's not the issue. I could certainly see error messages pop up whenever we look through there, but I think damaged applications are not going to show you or cause your entire system to just completely power off. So not the case. 2% said BIOS upgrade. Generally, a BIOS upgrade is something that you would do manually. It's very unusual for a system to automatically update the BIOS, although, as we have seen with Windows updates, this is not completely outside the realm of possibility. It's something that you would rarely do. And certainly, if your system was performing a BIOS upgrade, you would know about it. It would give you messages on the screen. It would completely lock you out of the operating system until it was completed, at which point it would power down your system and power back up. So this would not be a situation where everything's working normally and suddenly it abruptly powers down. There would be some type of warning, assuming that it did instigate some automated BIOS upgrade process, which is just scary for anything to work that way. We don't want to be in that situation. And lastly, network outage, 0% said this had anything to do with the network. And you're absolutely correct. A network outage does not cause computers to power down. So in this case, the option that really is the best option is indeed B, the overheating option. is what we were looking for. And if you answered B, overheating, you got that one absolutely correct. I want to thank JJ in the chat room with the $20 super chat. JJ says, got my first job in IT. Thank you for all your excellent content. Got my A+. It was a big help. This is what we keep telling you over and over, is that the things you learn with A+, the skills for hardware, software, operating systems, Mac OS, Linux, Windows, everything that we put into these training courses and in the exam objectives are extremely valuable. They're skills you can use throughout your entire career in IT. JJ, congratulations on your first job in IT. Thank you also for the $20 super chat. Also want to thank Too Chill, which apparently is very chill, as I understand it. Too Chill with the $20 super chat says, yo, professor, passed my Security Plus, got the trifecta. Your practice exams came in clutch. Can't thank you enough. Now going for my Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science with a better understanding. Fantastic. Congratulations on passing Security Plus and the trifecta. I'm glad the practice exams help. That's something where we really like our practice exams, the things we'll do here. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. And best of luck with your Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. This is a great way to get started in the world of technology. So thank you so much also for that $20 super chat. We do appreciate it. You know, all of these things that we're talking about in these questions that we've been doing have been from all over the place. There's cloud-based questions. There's questions about networking. We have questions about troubleshooting. And of course, there's going to be more that we're doing today. And one of the things that can be a challenge is that there is so much content in the exam objectives. Have you looked at these objectives? They are huge. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of topics that you have to know. So when you start looking at this and trying to go through every video, we're talking 137 of my A+ videos. That's a lot of videos over 19 hours of content. Now, not everybody has time to go through 137 videos. I get it. So what I created was a set of course notes that takes all of the important information from the videos and puts it into a format that you can easily have in a single place, whether it's a digital PDF like the one that I'm showing here with all the port numbers and graphics and information about what's in each individual video. I also have physical versions of these, which is really the same book. It's just a printed copy made from dead trees. That's what don't worry, we make more trees. We grow trees like they're crazy here. So this is the physical version. You can purchase that physical version. And if you get the physical version, I send you the digital one for free. It's something that we like to have here. I have both notes available for the 1101 and 1102. In fact, if you purchase them together, there's a little bit of a discount. So when you go to purchase the first one, it will say, you know, we can cut you a deal here. You can pay just a little bit more and get the other one. What do you think? It's a great way to support the site as well. Learn more about that. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/1101notes. ProfessorMesser.com/1101notes for my A+ course notes. They're available for both the Core 1 and the Core 2 exams. Have a look at those. Let's do another question. I've got more multiple choice here for us to go through. This next question on our list asks, what security feature is associated with the connection of a new Bluetooth device? Is it domain password, face recognition, fingerprint, PIN, 802.1x? What security feature is associated with the connection of a new Bluetooth device? Is it domain password, face recognition, fingerprint, PIN, or 802.1x? It's got to be one of those, right? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by visiting ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll have to see what's there. There is quite a bit that we will go through. Now, when people in the chat room, I see NYC's asking, will this be uploaded soon? Whenever we finish a live stream, it is automatically available immediately afterwards on YouTube. So you can't go wrong. There's nothing I have to do. I click the stop button. It processes it for a minute or so, and then the video is immediately available afterwards. Might take me a little bit more time to add the podcast audio-only version of this, but hopefully That's something that we'll do very quickly today so that you can have access to that on the audio side as well. There's always questions about security on the A+ exam, because security is really everyone's job, whether you're a desktop administrator, a server administrator, a network professional, and obviously on the security team. It's really useful to be able to understand the nuances of security and how it's implemented with these technologies. So this would be one of those. This is an important security concern when you get into things like Bluetooth. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, what security feature is associated with the connection of a new Bluetooth device? Is it a domain password, a face recognition, fingerprint, PIN, or 802.1x? Let's see what you chose. Click show results. 70%, 70, say that the answer is PIN, or personal identification number. We've got 22% that say that uses 802.1x. We've also got single digits. 6% said domain password, 2% said fingerprint, and 1% say face recognition. So we'll probably throw those out. We'll come back to those in just a moment. But when we talk about connecting to a Bluetooth device, can you imagine how it must be if none of these Bluetooth devices had any type of security, which means anyone could connect to any of your Bluetooth devices? That's not what we want either. So before you're able to use a Bluetooth device, you have to pair your mobile phone to the Bluetooth device. And once you do that one time, it's now able to use that with any type of pairing process. That pairing process, you would first turn on Bluetooth on both sides of this and put them into what's called a discoverable mode. And then you would choose the device that you have discovered. So I would choose my devices. I've got a device here that's discoverable. I've set my computer, my iPhone up as being discoverable. Now I can connect to that from other Bluetooth devices. So this is the real challenge now is we're finally ready to connect to these and use them together. And the way that you confirm that you're really connecting to the right device is both sides of this will show a personal identification number, a PIN. And it may require that you type the PIN into the device, or it may just ask, is this the same PIN that you see over on the other side? And if both of those match, you could say, yes, we're absolutely talking about the same two devices. Nobody's sitting in the middle of this conversation. It's not some other third-party device that's somewhere else in the room. It's both of these devices. We will confirm that. And from that point forward, those two devices are now paired, and you don't have to go through that process ever again. That personal identification number is that last security check, that last sanity check to make sure that you are pairing together two devices and you know what those two devices happens to be, which means the answer here would indeed be D, the personal identification number. That is exactly what we were looking for. Now, 802.1x is a type of port-based authentication. That port-based authentication is very commonly done if you are connecting to a wireless network or a wired network and you need to authenticate with your username and password. Well, Bluetooth doesn't require any type of formal username, password, or anything else to be able to authenticate. In fact, the pairing process is not really an authentication process. It's really one where you're confirming these two devices are the ones we're dealing with, and now we're locking together the relationship between those two. The personal identification number is what we really have to find. 802.1x is not used at all by Bluetooth. Bluetooth devices don't use that relatively complex process that is involved with 802.1x, so it would not be answer E. We would also not use a domain password. I have a lot of Bluetooth devices just in this room, and I don't have any Windows domain. So we don't want to limit the ability to connect to Bluetooth by having a domain, a Windows domain somewhere, and we don't use a password for those either. We've also got 1% say face recognition. Bluetooth devices do not use face recognition during this pairing process, and they also don't use fingerprints to be able to confirm or provide access or link those two devices together. Remember, we're just making sure that we're dealing and can identify both of those two different devices. we don't need any type of formal authentication. We can pretty much assume that if you're holding the phone and you're holding the Bluetooth speakers, that you must be the one working with them. We don't have to authenticate any further from there. That's the real key, is the personal identification number, the PIN. 73% of you got that one absolutely correct, and that is the right answer. If you're working with Bluetooth, you're going to be using that personal identification number. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would be glad to send you an email that certifies that you must have watched this first hour of the study group, and I will give you a webinar category CEU to go along with that in your email. The way that you would earn that CEU is you would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put September 2022 A+, and then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, Bluetooth PIN. The super secret code words of the month are Bluetooth PIN. Both of those, Bluetooth PIN. So make sure you put both of those. And then if you'd like to put anything else in that message to me, you're more than welcome to. I do read through every single one of those to be able to step through them. Have a look at that. It is available on my site. Make sure you follow that process. If you don't follow the process, you don't earn the CEU. Go to the top or the bottom of the website, click Contact Us, put your name, your email address, put September 2022 A+, and in the body of the message, put Bluetooth PIN. That's what we were looking for. Let's do another question, shall we? Yes, I have more here. Of course, there's more questions. This question asks, a third party is not able to validate the source of an incoming email. Which of the following determines the disposition of this email? Is it DMARC, SMIME, SPF, MX, or DKIM? A third party is not able to validate the source of an incoming email. Which of the following determines the disposition of this email? Is it DMARC, SMIME, SPF, MX, or DKIM? If you think you know the answer, follow the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in what you think the answer might be. See if you happen to know this. Those of you that are working on your 1101, this should be something very familiar to you. For those of you working on your 1001, you've never seen this before. This is a good example of something that is new in this version of the exam. So we'll talk more about where this comes from in a moment. Of course, I always have a link at the bottom of the explanation page that tells you exactly which video this is from. So make sure you check that and take some notes in just a bit. For some of you earlier, we're talking about the abbreviations of different things. You know, there are many different acronyms that stand for different things. I'll take, for example, an STP. What is STP? Now, half of you just said one thing, half of you just said another. It could be a shielded twisted pair, STP, shielded twisted pair. What about spanning tree protocol? STP, spanning tree protocol. So, folks in the chat room, if you're trying to narrow down a particular acronym to only certain words, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. So there are many acronyms out there that cover many different words. So don't lock yourself into what anything might be. Always check the exam objectives. So make sure you're familiar with this. Now, if you think you know the answers, please no hints in the chat room. Please no answers in the chat room. Let's see how we do today. There will be some Q&A after this first hour. So, yeah, stick around for that. We'll, of course, do a little bit of Q&A. Figure it out. STP, also an oil additive. So another good example. Thank you. Thank you, chat room, for that one. One never knows what these abbreviations might be. There are only a million of them. And wait till you get to Network Plus. That's all I can really tell you. Network Plus, I think, is the king or queen of acronyms. Thank you, chat room. We're going to come up with all of them. Stone Temple Pilots. How could I have not done that one? Come on. That would have been, that's obvious. That's what it should have been. Let's see. Speaking of obvious, let's see how you did with this question. It asked, a third party is not able to validate the source of an incoming email. Which of the following determines the disposition of this email? Is it DMARC, SMIME, SPF, MX, or DKIM. So when we talk about the disposition of the email, that's a fancy way of saying, what do we do with this thing? Wait, I got this email. I don't know where it came from. What do you want to do with it? There needs to be some direction to tell you, here's what you do with emails that don't fit what we're trying to do. And the easiest way to make this determination is to ask the sender and say, I'm not able to validate this email from you. What should I do with this? Well, we need to determine what the sender says by looking at their domain-based message authentication reporting and conformance information, or DMARC. DMARC is information that we put directly into our DNS server that would tell everyone else in the world, if anything looks squirrely with any of our emails, here's what you should do with it. And that DMARC configuration, and the idea behind this is to prevent spoofing. It's to prevent someone from sending an email that says it's from you, but it's not really from you. This extends the capabilities that we've already created through SPF and DKIM, which deal a lot with dispositions and digital signatures, and more specifically, who gets to send mail, and is that mail signed properly? Does it have a digital signature? If it doesn't match those, we then need to look at the DMARC record to determine what happens there. It's in a text record in your DNS, specifically a DMARC text record. And you can choose that if you get an email like that, just accept it. You could also say, send it to spam, because it's not from us, didn't validate. That's risky for email senders, by the way. Or reject the email. Nope, not even going to take it. Just send it back to whoever sent it to you. Also risky for people that send a lot of emails. This is not something you would simply change on the fly because it's a certain time of the day and you think it might be nice to change something. This is a very well thought out strategy on how your email messages should be managed. Because if something goes wrong on your side and something isn't digitally signed properly, or it's not emailed from the proper server, you could potentially have systems removing, rejecting, or deleting messages to your customers that are really legitimate. That's not what we want either. So that's a little bit of a challenge. And usually this is set up so that every week or every month you'll receive a set of reports that say, here's how many times we rejected an email. Here's how many times we sent an email to spam. So it gives you some feedback as to why these particular problems occurred. Yet another way that we can help to make this process more visible for everybody, something that everyone understands how emails are managed properly, we do by using these text records in DNS, and most specifically the SPF, the DKIM, and the domain-based message authentication reporting and conformance record, or DMARC. That is the correct answer. It is indeed DMARC is what we were looking for, and you can see that 27% of you chose DMARC. This is one that we figured there would be kind of a mix of things because this is a relatively new topic. This came, by the way, in the section 2.6 DNS configuration, because there's a lot of DNS in this particular question. In fact, you'll notice SPF is in this question and DKIM is in the answer to this question. So that's why SPF 15% and DKIM 17% would not be the one that determines the disposition. But it does help you determine if it is a legitimate email to begin with. We also have MX records. That is the mail exchanger record. That's a record you put in your DNS so people know where to send email to you. Not what we were looking for in this particular question. And then SMIME, Secure MIME. This is a way of sending emails and adding digital signatures and encryption to it, usually based on the email client you happen to be using. If you're using Outlook, for instance, and you're sending encrypted email messages or digitally signed email messages, you're using SMIME. That's exactly what you would choose for that one. In this case, although SMIME got the plurality to 31%, the actual answer is DMARC, 27% of you. That may be a good one. If you want to configure DMARC, it's really, really simple to configure. There's lots of websites that can walk you through it. This is a good example of a DMARC record using example.com. This is a text record. This is a graphical front end to the DNS, that one of the DNS types that I use. And you can see that it's really just putting in all of this weird text here. The V equals DMark1, P equals none, SP is quarantine. So already we know what to do. Emails, they should be quarantined. That's what it's telling us. And it's got to be a 100%. And then we get a example, a report that is emailed out when that occurs. That goes to dmarkreports@example.com. That is the record. That's all we have to put into our DNS to have this work properly. So it's a good example of how DMARCs work. Make sure you're familiar with DMARC, SPF, and DKIM, and how all of those work together with your emails. It's all part of that original DNS configuration video in section 2.6. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's do one more question, though. Let's go into a little bit of overtime and see how we do with this next question. We need a bounce back question, don't we? So here's our bounce back question, and it asks, which of the following uses ultraviolet light to produce a printed output? Well, it's just how it's going to go, people. That's just how we're going to work through all of these questions that we have. Which of the following uses ultraviolet light to produce a printed output? Is it resin, inkjet, thermal, laser, impact? Which of the following uses ultraviolet light to produce a printed output? Is it resin, inkjet, thermal, laser, or impact? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in the answer. See what you think it happens to be. A lot of people locking this one in. Hopefully we bounced back really well with this one. Hopefully this is a technology you're familiar with. This is one of many types of printer questions you're getting. The chat room's like, I don't like the printer questions. Don't like them. But there's plenty. There were a lot of printer questions, especially if you're someone who is working through all of these exam objectives. There are a lot of exam objectives. So make sure you're familiar with that printer section. Maybe next month we'll just do all printers. You want to do that? Would that be good? All printer questions? The chat room loves the idea. Look at them. They're so excited over the idea of all printers all the time. Maybe not. Maybe that's a bad idea. They're not happy at all. It's a revolt, everyone. They've had it. No, thank you. That is one of those. Hopefully you're familiar. That is the key. So let's try this one out, since a number of you have answered this one already. A number of you are waiting to see what this one might be. This question asked, which of the following uses ultraviolet light to produce a printed output? Is it resin, inkjet, thermal, laser, or impact? Let's show our results. 56% of us say laser is what we would use to be able to do that. 24% say resin is what we would use. 18% say thermal. 2% said impact. 1% said inkjet. Well, for those of you that have worked with a laser printer uses a laser beam, not ultraviolet light. It uses a laser to be able to do that. So it would not be ultraviolet light in that scenario because a laser works at very high frequencies to be able to have that, not ultraviolet, literally in the name laser. So what would then be left to print using ultraviolet light? What could we use for that? Well, it would be a 3D printer, specifically a resin printer to be able to do this. Stereolithography, or SLA, is a type of 3D printing that uses resin to be able to do this. Usually it uses a light source like ultraviolet light. It could also use a laser to be able to use this, but it would be an ultraviolet light very commonly, especially because ultraviolet light tends to be less expensive, although laser is obviously very accurate in how they work. Resin is, it's a very nice way to do 3D printing. It provides a very nice output. The problem when you get into resin, though, is that it is a chemical. So you have to make sure you use the proper protective gear and that you dispose of any unneeded resin in a way that is something that's proper for the environment. So you have to take it to a local hazardous waste facility, for example, to be able to do this. Resin is, though, a very, very good way to create a 3D model and have it in a very detailed, granular, fine form. Very nice output comes from these SLA printers. It's really just having to deal with the chemicals, the resin there, and being able to work through it. But it is, of course, the ultraviolet light that is hardening the resin on each layer that you are building and adding to over time. So that's what we were looking for, was the resin side. I was hoping we would bounce back, but we didn't. 54% of you chose a laser printer to do this, but indeed, resin is the one that uses the ultraviolet light to be able to make that happen. 24% of you chose resin. That is the right answer. Inkjet printers use ink. They don't use ultraviolet light. They literally, in the name inkjet, use the ink that is there, but little bubbles of ink, little tiny dots of ink that are pulled out of the ink cartridge. A thermal printer doesn't really use anything other than heat to change the color of the page. So there is no ink, there's no resin, there's no laser, and there's no light at all. It's really just heat. Be able to have that there. And then impact printers, very similar to dot matrix printers, is a good example of an impact printer. I used to work with a chain printer that was associated with a mainframe computer, a very high-speed impact printer. But those generally will use a ribbon, a cloth ribbon that has ink in it to be able to put information on the page. In this particular case, the one we were looking for, the only one of these that uses ultraviolet light to produce the output, is indeed answer A, resin. 24% of you got that one absolutely right. Resin, the resin printers, we had in the older version of the A+, we had a lot of the other types of 3D printers where you have some type of method to create 3D without having all the resin there. The resin printers are becoming a lot more common, and now that they are that way, you'll see them in the exam objectives. Well, they list both the filament printers and the resin printers. So you've got a couple of different options to choose from. Be able to have that there. This is, as you can already tell, a lot of information that you're going to cover. And we've got our course notes to kind of help you through this. A number of you, since you heard that a new version of the exam would be coming out, you also thought, well, we need some practice questions. And if you go out to ProfessorMesser.com, you'll notice that we have now released our copy of the 220-1101 Core 1 A+ Practice Exams book, a brand new practice exams book with 389 pages of questions, 3 separate practice exams, all in one single book. Includes both multiple choice, performance-based questions. And I'm going to show you what these look like in a moment. But these, by far, from everything else I've seen available on the market, and I think I've pretty much seen all of them, this is the most accurate and most true to objective set of practice questions that you will find on the market. And it is intentionally designed to fit that way. You're not going to see old questions in here. You're not going to see questions in here that come from older exam versions. I don't know why people will do that, but they do. What you will find are questions that provide very specific questions and answers that are directly related to the A+ exam objectives. So let's do one. I'm going to show you the questions from my brand new book that is available for purchase today on the Professor Messer website. Let's step through one of these questions. A9 asks, a network connection in a conference room was installed years ago, and there's no documentation for the cable run. Connecting a device to the cable results in a successful Ethernet connection, so the other end of the cable should terminate somewhere in the wiring closet. Which of these tools would be the best choice to find the other end of the network connection? Is it a cable tester, a tone generator, a multimeter, or a crimper? Now, of course, you could flip over to page 31. That's our quick answers in the book. But I've also got a set of detailed answers. And if I click that, it moves me automatically to page 44 of the book. So this is a very quick way, if you're using the PDF, to jump right to where the answer might be. And in fact, it tells us answer B is tone generator. And you can see here that I tell you why answer B is the right answer. You can see the tone generator creates an analog tone. We've got a lot of information here about why the right answer was right. Now, my problem, though, when I read through these books, I always get the questions wrong. And I'd like to know, why did I get the question wrong? How can I redirect myself the next time I see something like that? So every question in this book not only includes a description of the correct answer, but also a description of each incorrect answer, because in my mind, that's where you're going to learn. That's where you're going to figure out where you may have gone wrong with this question, and you can redirect yourself back to the proper answers. I would also highly recommend that if you get this book and you get the answer right, don't skip the wrong answers, because the wrong answers could give you some ideas about technologies that could occur on the actual exam. So that's an important part of it too. Now, when you finish reading through those, I also put a link at the very bottom that gives you a link back to all of the videos. So if you've read the question and you're trying to figure out, I don't even know what the question means, I don't understand what these words are, what is this question referring to? You can always click the link that's right at the bottom, or you can point your phone right at the QR code, and it will take you to the actual video that describes the information contained within the question. Once you're done with this, I'm in my PDF reader. I'm just going to click the back button, and now I can go to the next question that's on my book. This is my practice exams. Right now, we have finished the 220-1101 set of these practice exams. This is the best set of practice exams I think I've ever created. They are extensive and specific to the 220-1101 exam. You won't find anything like this anywhere else in the industry. You can find out more, go to professormesser.com/core1pe if you'd like to learn more of that. And if you purchase it with my practice exams, with my course notes, you bundle those together, there's a little bit of a price benefit there. So you get a little bit of money off if you get both of those together. You can find out more, go to professormesser.com/core1pe. Well, as I mentioned, everything that's in this video that we went through today, everything that's in my course notes, everything that's in my practice exams, all comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. CompTIA exam objectives tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. If you are running into practice exams or other materials that go outside the scope of these exam objectives, then they are doing you a disservice, because CompTIA stays very laser focused to the CompTIA certification exam Core 1 objectives document. This is the important part. If you ever get into dealing with, is it on the exam or is it not on the exam? This is your document. This tells you everything you need to know, and it's free. Go to professormesser.com/objectives for a link that will take you over to the CompTIA website, or simply type in your favorite search engine, CompTIA exam objectives. You'll be able to find everything you need there. Got a lot to go through, and the benefit of having a checklist cannot be understated. It's a great thing to read through before you start your studies. It's also a nice thing to checklist your way through before you go into your exam. That way you'll know if you've really studied the things you need to know before you take that exam. We've got more of these study groups. As I mentioned, we've got a study group in a couple of days, September the 12th, as we sit here on the 10th. You can see that on Monday, we're going to do another one for the 220-1102 study group. So if you're studying for the next exam that's in this series, we'll have a study group just like this one, where I've got all new questions we can go through. Please stop by for that. We've also got more available coming up in October, on October the 4th, October the 6th. You will always find plenty of information on my website. Go to professormesser.com/calendar. If you join us on Discord, there's an events calendar in Discord as well. You can't go wrong. One of those two will get you where you need to be. Well, we went through an hour of Q&A. Really, that went really, really fast, didn't it? There was a lot going on there, but stick around. We've got an after show. I want to take your questions from the chat room. So instead of me asking you the questions, why don't you ask me the questions? Don't forget about our exam vouchers so that you don't pay full price for your vouchers. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers and also get a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. Don't forget about my course notes and practice exams. You can find it at professormesser.com/1101success. And lastly, we've got all the links you can find. Follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. Don't forget about our YouTube channel. If you liked this video, we would love it if you could give it a thumbs up. My YouTube representative, he's always checking my videos and saying, this one was good, this one was good, this one was okay, this one was good. So it's up to you to help me put that thumbs up right there for the folks at YouTube. I've got another meeting with them hopefully coming up soon. I would love to be able to show them this one as well. There's a lot of things we're going to go through in the next hour. Stick around. I want to take your questions. We'll see what we come up with. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Okay, let's see if I can adjust my camera. Here we go. And get rid of that. Hey, all worked, didn't it? Is there a standalone version of the Exam Hacks ebook? I don't know what that means. They're all standalone. I mean, it's a PDF. The Exam Hacks ebook is a PDF, so you can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong with that one. Let's very quickly, I'm going to change some lower thirds on my side so that I have the right information on my screen. There we go. And in this after show, we've sort of finished the main part of the study group. But in the after show, I do like to take your questions. You can, of course, go to professormesser.com/live. Or if you're on YouTube now, it's the same chat. I just embed the YouTube chat that's on my website. So either way is fine. If you are there and you are in the chat, I'm able to see the chats that are going by. We're able to break this down, figure out the details. Guy in the chat room, thank you for the $10 super chat. Guy says, passed the 220-1101 and now A+ certified, because just like I mentioned earlier, Guy took the 1102 first. So I almost want to say people do it backwards, but it's really not backwards. Pick the exam you're most comfortable with, finish that one up, and then you can take the next one. So congratulations, Guy, on your A+ certification. Guy says, thank you for the great content, Professor. Congratulations on your hard work and for earning both the 220-1102 and 1101 to get that A+ certification. And also thanks for the $10 super chat. We do appreciate your support. So thanks for helping me keep these lights on and everything else here. There's not a standalone version of the Exam Hacks ebook. The only way to get the Exam Hacks ebook is to either purchase a success bundle on my website or to purchase a voucher. Those are the only ways to gain access to those. Let's answer a couple of other questions here to see what we have available. AP has a question about the course notes. Are they like study guides for the A+? Well, I guess they're somewhat like study guides. They're not a book like a traditional textbook, but they are a way to summarize here's what's in the exam. So all those great graphics, the text, the charts, the diagrams, the images, everything that's in my videos, that's what I put in the course notes. So that was the idea. Not everybody has time to kind of write down every word that's on the slides or wants to. So this is just a very quick way to provide you with that. You can make your own notes. You can go through the videos, go through every single video, write down every single thing that's on the screen, write down every chart that you see on the screen, and write down every important graphic that you see. See? It's that easy. So, or you can get the course notes, or you just get that. See? It's simple. That was the idea. If you find that they have some value, that's great. If that's something you don't think you need, that's fine too. You know, that's the whole point of this, is to give you some options. The third part of this is it helps support what we do here. So there's really a win-win if you want to look at it that way. Hopefully it's some valuable information that can help you pass your certification, and it's something that also keeps the lights on and helps us keep doing more of these videos. So it's always good as well. Questions in the chat room. This one from Evan, who says, I'm currently changing careers from law enforcement background, currently working on A+ and Network+, have a bachelor's in criminal justice. Should I worry about getting an IT degree as well? Probably not. What we tend to see for the for someone who is getting into IT. First, IT degrees are not very common. From at least in the United States, from four-year colleges and universities, IT degrees are either uncommon or they are really just computer science degrees renamed IT. I'm not sure why universities continue to do this. Universities believe that programming is IT. Universities believe that hardware development is IT. Universities believe, and I promise you this is an actual thing because I just looked at an IT program for a university here in Florida. And you have to not only, I was looking through and think, well, this is really good. They got networking in here. They got security. They got operating systems. And then they have a year of physics. Why? What are they doing? What are these universities thinking? They aren't thinking. So unfortunately, universities haven't quite figured out the whole IT thing. What you tend to see is people with a type of degree. If you have a four-year degree, that's usually good enough for most employers, as long as you can take some type of practical IT experience to supplement that with. For example, I have a degree in business management. Has nothing to do with technology. It has nothing to do with programming, has nothing to do with IT. It has nothing to do with anything technical. I think I did take one course, an introduction to MIS. For those of you who haven't been around in the world of technology for a while, that stands for Management Information Systems, which doesn't mean anything for some reason. It means here's a bunch of data. How do you look at the data and make business decisions from it? That's not really IT either. Although some could argue big data sort of now creeped in and now big data sort of becomes that, but that was not the case when I got my degree in business management. But I was able to get a job doing IT-related things because I had an interest in IT. I built my own home labs. I started connecting devices together. I started building my own computers. I really started getting more hands-on so that I could have a conversation with a prospective employer about how exciting this technology is and the things that I've done with it. So I would recommend that if you already have a four-year degree, leverage that four-year degree. Even better, if you already have, and this really is more specific for people changing careers, if you already have experience with law enforcement, we need tons of IT in law enforcement. I have worked with so many different police agencies, both state and local, in very large. I've worked with some of the biggest police departments in the country, and the number of people working in IT is just massive. Think of all the technology we have to deal with from a law enforcement perspective. Think of all the data that we have to deal with. Let's just only think about license tags. How do you manage a database of license tags? A database of license tags that everyone needs access to immediately, in some cases instantly, remotely from a car, and it could be a life and death situation. You know, those are technologies that we don't often run into if you're in insurance or transportation or something else. But if you're in law enforcement, if you're doing IT in a hospital, it's really a different level, isn't it? And if you've already got experience in law enforcement, why not take advantage of that experience? So I would highly recommend you call back to your friends that are working in law enforcement. Talk to the IT departments in your law enforcement area. Maybe it's a state or even local law enforcement. There may be some opportunities there as well. I know if I was hiring somebody in IT, I would love it if they had knowledge of the rest of what the organization does, because we tend to get siloed in IT. We tend to think about, we have an operating system and there's a database and there's the cloud and we need a VPN and I've got to put all these things together to connect you. Okay, we did it. I got the VPN connected with the cloud, with the next generation firewall, with your desktop and a tab. None of those are all just a bunch of technologies. They don't actually do anything. But we tend to get focused on the technology and not what what people are trying to do with the technology. And think about law enforcement. We need to read fingerprints. We need to do DNA samples. We need to access these enormous databases. We need to compare different types of data from different places to bring it all together. Those are the things that become important from a law enforcement and how we can blend law enforcement and IT together. That's just one example. Do the same thing with transportation. Do the same thing with healthcare. Do the same thing with manufacturing. All of these things become important. So for those of you that are looking at moving from one type of job into IT, don't leave your old job behind completely. You may be able to leverage that knowledge and ultimately may be working for you. So that's my recommendation for those of you. I don't think you need to go back and get an IT degree. I think you instead need to focus on IT-related skills and show an employer that you are familiar and understand those IT-related skills. In the chat room, some folks asking, is the 1001 and 1002 still valid? These are questions that I will continue to get up until October the 20th, I assure you. October the 20th is the retirement date for the 220-1001 and 220-1002. If you are studying for those exams, you have until October the 20th. That's like a month and 10 days, right? That's not very long. That's not a great situation to be in. So if you are currently starting your studies, I would highly recommend you look into the 1101 and 1102. I think that's going to be important to consider as well. Here is a content-related question from Anthony in the chat room. This is a good one. Anthony says, what's the difference between a DHCP reservation and a static IP address? So there's a pretty good question, because that's two ways that you could set up an IP address on a device that never changes. And it functionally, they're exactly the same thing. I can set an IP address for this server that never changes by setting an IP or DHCP reservation. Or I could set this server to always have the same IP address by manually setting a static IP address on the device itself. Both accomplish exactly the same thing. Both work similar in function. They both now will always have that device having the same IP address, always associated with it. So why would I want to use a DHCP reservation instead of a static IP address? The question now becomes, what if I need to change it? Now, let's say that I have 100 servers and I have set a static IP address. I've gone to all 100 servers and I've set a static IP address on all 100 of those servers. It took me a week, but I did it. And now all 100 of those servers, I went to each individual server and I typed in the IP addresses and the subnet mask and the default gateways and the DNS settings, and I locked it in. Great. And now my boss came to me this week and said, oh, we're changing our IP address scheme. Did I mention that? So now we're using a different subnet. Make sure you update everything. Thanks. Wait, I just spent a week going to each individual machine. Some of these are located on the other side of the city or the state or the country or outside the country. And I had to go to each one of them, either remotely or in front of them, and make that change. So if anything has to change again, I now have to go back to every single one of them if I set this up statically. But if I set a DHCP reservation, I go to one place. I go to the DHCP server. And I say, well, it was this IP address. Now it's this one. Done. Instead of it taking me another week to roll out this new IP address scheme, it took me a few minutes. Now I'm done. And the next time that person reboots or they release and they reload a new DHCP server, a new DHCP IP address, it now uses the new IP address and now everything's done. So that's the real key. It's really about managing everything the right way, managing it from one central console and doing it in a way that's most efficient. You should probably hardly ever, if ever, be manually configuring an IP address on a device. The only time I think you probably might see this is with infrastructure devices where you don't want the infrastructure device to communicate or have a requirement to communicate to the DHCP server. For example, you always want your firewall to have an IP address. That's probably a good place where you would put a static IP in. Maybe same thing for your switches and routers, but that's kind of about it. Outside the scope of those devices, you should probably be using DHCP reservations. It's a much more effective, efficient way, especially if you need to make changes later on. Let's do some more questions. It was not FSU's program, but they're all bad. For those of you asking, what program was that? Just look around at the state universities in Florida. You'll find it soon enough. I had a similar problem when I got my business degree. I got a degree in business management, and they made you take calculus. Really? Universities are so good at this. They're so good at not understanding the world and how things work, and somehow think that calculus has something to do with business. Calculus does not have anything to do with business. They think that physics has something to do with IT. Physics does not have anything to do with IT. Why do they make you take that? I don't know. I think they are just being contrary. I think they just like seeing the world burn. They like to see you fail. That's the only thing I can guess. I don't know. It seems obvious that it has nothing to do with IT, but they just love doing that. So there you go. They can say that you made it through that very difficult IT training program with your 1 year of physics knowledge that you will now never use again in your life. I don't understand. It's really, ultimately, I really do understand. It's really about schools not understanding that programming is not IT and IT is not programming. That's really the problem. And we're slowly trying to get out of that. And it's very slowly trying to get out of that. It's very difficult to move universities any direction. They're getting slightly better because what's happening is third parties outside of universities are training people in IT better than universities are. And they're becoming very sensitive to this. So we're seeing more and more work through that. We'll have to see if that really turns out that way. Now, not all IT programs are that way. It's just that most of them are. So some of you that have gone through a great IT training program at your university, you have a unicorn there. You've got a very unique situation when that happens. So that's sort of the way that works. Let's do some more questions from the chat. I'd like to say GBlazer3 in the chat room who says, I just passed my 1002 today. I'm A+ certified today, thanks to you, Professor Messer. Well, I didn't do anything, by the way, GBlazer3. You're the one that passed the exam, so congratulations. I'm putting it back on you. I'm putting all of the hard work and passing the exam right into your lap. Congratulations on your 1002. You got it done well before October the 20th. This must have already been on your calendar. You must have already been thinking about that. And now you're done for 3 years. So this is great. You've got the same A+ certification that everyone else has, and now it's good for 3 years. So congratulations on that. Always great to hear the success stories when they happen. We like to celebrate with you. So today is your A+ anniversary. Congratulations. Now you just have to maintain it for the next 3 years and then upgrade or update it as needed past that. Becomes pretty important. Other questions. Let's keep going for this list. Let's see. A lot of people talking Security Plus in the chat, and a lot of people doing Security Plus are mentioning a relationship to the U.S. federal government. That's an important relationship, by the way. For the U.S. federal government, specifically Department of Defense, but it tends to go outside the scope of that in a very large degree, is that a lot of those jobs require at a bare minimum the Security Plus certification. They really don't care as much for A+ and Network Plus. They think your starting point should be Security Plus. So for those of you that you're working with a military network, you're working with a third party that is a contractor for the military, or you're doing anything relating to the U.S. federal government, you may find a requirement that you earn the Security Plus certification, even though technically you're not employed by the federal government. That happens as well. So make sure that if you're going through A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, you're doing the right ones in the right order with the right objectives. This changes also depending on where you live in the world. If you're in that DC, Virginia, Maryland area of the United States, you're going to find a lot of jobs there ask you for Security Plus. But if you live in Orlando, Florida, it's a little bit different. There are some federal contractors in Orlando, Florida, but not a ton. And once you get outside the scope of that, you may find that nobody may be asking for Security Plus. Maybe most everybody's asking for A Plus or Network Plus. You'll just have to look at the job postings in your area to see exactly what's there, which is why I really recommend that if you're thinking, what certification should I get? Should I get A Plus? Should I get Network Plus? Should I get Security Plus? Go see what employers are asking for. A lot of people I find will simply go get Security Plus because they think security is interesting, which in itself not a bad strategy, but wouldn't it be nice if we could also get a certification that employers would want us to have as well? So that's why I always tell people, do some research, make a list, get a spreadsheet going, understand where all the open positions are in your area, make sure you understand what all the requirements are for each of those employers, and see what certifications they might want from you. It might point you in a little bit more of a direction. Maybe you start to find out that everybody wants you to be Security Plus certified. Or after doing your research, you realize, wow, nobody's asking for Security Plus. Maybe then you can make a more educated decision about what certification would make sense. So I would recommend you do that and be able to really understand what's my best opportunity for getting a job in this particular area. And the best way to do it is to find the requirements that the employers would like you to have. That's the key. Let's do some other questions. Yes, with DoD, you do need clearances. There's much more than just certifications. I'm not saying that certifications is something that's all-inclusive. It's not. Of course it is not. Just like certifications for non-government jobs are there to provide you with a very specific set of proof points. If you watch my video, and there's a link to this in the YouTube video description, if you watch my video on how to get a job in IT with no experience, I tell you, you really need 4 elements. You need a formal degree. We've talked about 4-year degrees here already. You need industry certifications, A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and others. You need some type of real-world experience. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean professional experience where someone's paying you, but it would be nice if you had some familiarity of these technologies. And we often talk about home labs as being an important part of that. And absolutely, if you've never set up Active Directory, that's a great home lab. Go set it up. You can do it today. If you've never worked with a firewall or an IPS, maybe it'd be great to load one up, send some data through it, and see what you can do with it. Those are great things to set up in a lab at your home, not only because it's interesting in the technology itself, but you're going to run into problems during the implementation, and you should make a lot of notes when you're doing this, because those are stories you can take to your interview, where you can tell somebody, oh, I just installed Active Directory. I installed Windows Server 20, whatever you installed. Here's what I did. I set it up in a VM, and I ran into an enormous problem with DNS, and here's the problem we ran into. Here's how I recognized what the problem was. Here's how we resolved the problem, and here's what happened afterwards. That is kind of a 10-minute conversation you can have with someone who's a hiring manager that helps them understand, okay, you've already installed Active Directory, which means you've installed Windows Server. You ran into a problem with DNS, so you already know what DNS is and the DNS services. You already know how to configure DNS because you fixed it. And then you can go from there and even talk about more about Active Directory. Oh, I set up some group policies. I pushed those group policies out to separate machines. You know, all of that becomes a story, a series of stories that not only keep you talking during the interview process, but lets the person you're talking to understand, oh yeah, you've really done this. You're very familiar with these technologies. I would argue that if you just do that bare minimum, then you're probably more qualified than most anyone else who's walking in on these particular interviews. Remember, you don't have to be the expert in Active Directory to get this job. You just have to be better than everyone else. So if you've got an opportunity to build out your own Windows server with Active Directory and your own DNS services, absolutely do this. And if it doesn't work, that's great. Something not working isn't failure. It's only failure if you stop right there. The good part of something not working, it's your opportunity to learn from that. So now you can do some more research. You can go through the process of trying some different things. You can take a snapshot in your VM, try something. Oh, it didn't work. Let's revert back to the previous config. Let's try something else. You can use all of these technologies and skills that you've accumulated over time to help build out this infrastructure on your screen. You've built out a data center just in a couple of windows that's on your laptop. It's really that easy, and it works just perfectly. In fact, if you watched my videos on my 1101 course, there's an entire video on Active Directory. And I demonstrate Active Directory. I demonstrate the group policy. We push group policy settings out. We look at the results of those. The entire thing is done in VMs because I'm running a Mac on my workstation in front of me. So I set up a VM on the Mac. I set up different windows. I had all of them running at the same time. We built out effectively a data center of devices with a couple of servers and a couple of workstations. We pushed around some group policies. We tested the group policies. It really was an interesting thing to do, but I was able to do that, capture all of it, and put it in those videos. So you can do exactly the same thing, and I highly recommend that you do. In NYC, would it be possible to get an entry-level job in IT without a degree or certification? I'm currently studying your videos to get certified. You know, whenever you don't have one of those elements, the last element, by the way, because I talked about a formal degree, industry certifications, some practical experience. The last thing, the last element, and perhaps probably the most important one, you already know someone who works there. That is an important element. Knowing someone who works there. It doesn't even have to be someone in IT. It's just someone you can reference. Oh, I'm very familiar with your organization. I know Bob in accounting. He tells me all the time about how great it is here. I thought I would come in and talk to you guys about IT, what opportunities might be available, and things I might be able to do to help. You know, that's important as well. So we talk about, can I get a job in IT without a degree or without certification? You could, but it's so much easier if you have one or all of those elements. You can't just rely on a formal degree. You can't just rely on industry certifications. You can't just rely on practical experience, just as you can't just rely on knowing someone who works there. Probably in my career in IT, and I probably had throughout my career, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 15 different positions. Now, that doesn't mean different companies. That means I would maybe start in one company as a Tier 1 help desk, and then I would get a promotion to Tier 2 help desk, and then get a promotion to a Tier 3. So really, my desk never changed. My phone number never changed. My employer never changed, but that's 3 jobs. So that's how I'm counting these. So in my IT career, I probably had somewhere between 10 to 15 jobs. That's probably about right. If I start thinking about all of these positions that I took and the things that I was able to do, because some of them did take me from one company to another company to another. When I think about it, the very first job I got in IT was with a computer company in South Miami where I really knew nobody there. And to this day, I'm not sure why they hired me, but they did, thankfully. And they hired me, and I worked there kind of a short period of time, really about 9 months. I was a field service tech. So I would get there in the morning. I would collect everything I needed for all of the things that I had to visit that day. I had a lot of different customers I had to visit. Sometimes it was to deliver a printer cable that was improperly delivered the day before or didn't show up. Maybe it's to upgrade a system's memory. Maybe it's to install a new storage drive. Maybe it's to perform a warranty repair for a hard drive. You know, it could be a number of different things. It's whatever you were faced with when you hopped in the car that day. And I would just drive around South Florida all day, going from place to place to place, listening to Neil Rogers and Rick and Suds, and Phil Hendry and just go from place to place to place to place. And then at the end of the day, I would drop everything off at the store and then I go back home. That was 9 months of my job. But think of the things you could learn. In a single day, I was learning things. Now, during a 9-month period, we really started to learn a lot about the hardware, the operating systems, how to set things up. It was a great job for learning. Great job for learning technology and great job for learning all of the roads in South Florida and how to get out of traffic. That was the real key. Those were the 2 takeaways from that job. Every job after that, though, the next 14 positions in my career, I knew someone who worked there. The next job I got after that was working for an insurance company in town who happened to be one of our customers. So I would show up every day, every other day with a delivery, with a replacement, with a warranty repair, with something. So I got to work with them. I got to talk with them. I got to kind of show them the things I knew, the skills that I had learned over those 9 months. So they already knew me. So when a position opened up and I submitted my resume, they're like, well, yeah, we're gonna hire you. We already know you. You're here every day. We know your skills. We know you're a hard worker. We know you'll show up on time. We know that you're easy to work with, and you already know all of these pieces of technology that we already own. So it's one of those where every job I got after the first one, I knew someone who worked there. Sometimes directly in IT, sometimes my direct manager, but sometimes in a different part of the company. And it was really an important thing to keep in mind, is that we often think of networking as Ethernet and TCP ports, but we have to remember about the people networking part. This is really what got me those jobs, was knowing people who work there. And once they know you, oh yeah, we know you. You come in here all the time. We can trust you. We like you. You can work with us. We'll do a job like that. So I have had, was this a job with a managed IT security service company? No, I've never worked for a managed IT service company. I have worked for computer companies. At the time, there were companies that all they did was sell computers back in the day. So that was my first job. I worked for insurance companies. At the time, I didn't know what insurance was, but I knew IT. That was a very good example of a disconnect between the technology part of the world and, in this case, the insurance part, the rest of the company. But I learned a lot about insurance while I was there. So it was a great opportunity to kind of learn the financial side of things and figure those parts out. I have worked for a value-added reseller, or a VAR. Those are becoming also increasingly unusual to find. I've worked for manufacturers. I've worked for Network General. They are now they've been acquired and not acquired over a series of years. But ultimately, I think they were bought by NetScout. So now they're now part of NetScout. And when I was working at Network General when we were acquired by NetScout, so I also worked for NetScout. Also worked for McAfee Associates. Actually, at the time, it was Network Associates, because McAfee and Network General merged, became Network Associates. I worked for that multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. And then there was a divorce, and I went back to working for Network General. IT's weird, people. I don't know what to tell you. This is a crazy business. And so that's when went back to work for Network General. They were acquired by NetScout. NetScout now has all of those sniffer products and everything else that's there. At that point, I left NetScout and went to work for Palo Alto Networks, which at the time was nobody. They weren't even shipping product when I started working there. I was one of the first teams. I was on the group of the first teams. There were about 4 of us that were the very first systems engineers in the company. So that's now, when you consider they probably have thousands and thousands and thousands of employees, I was employee number 95. So it kind of gives you an idea going back. So it wasn't at the very, very beginning, but I guess close enough to the very beginning. It was sub 100. Those were fun times too, because now I got to learn about the security side of things. And well, next generation firewalls didn't exist prior to that. So got a chance to really learn about next generation firewalls. That's the fun part too in this world of IT, is whatever you start with today is not going to be where you end up. there's just no way to prevent it. This world of IT moves way too quickly. So if you start a job on the help desk, and I hear this all the time from folks, help desk is a very common way to get your foot in the door. It's a very common job for someone just starting out in IT. And I feel that some people, and people have told me this, I was on the help desk, but I left because I could be a bartender and make more money. And I always reply back or circle back to those folks and say, that might be true for the first 6 months, but the upside to bartending comes nowhere close to the upside that IT can provide you. And that's where the differences are, is the upward mobility. IT has extensive upward mobility and things that you can now decide, what do you want to do? Do you like talking to people? There's a job in IT where you can just talk to people. Do you like working with, you like building your own networks? There's jobs in IT where you can build your own networks out. Do you like working with operating systems? There's jobs in IT where all you do is work with operating systems. Oh, do you like Windows? You can work with Windows. Oh, do you like Linux? Well, you can work with Linux. Do you like Mac OS, mobile devices? There's jobs for whatever interests you. And what's nice about IT is your interests will change over time, and your personal requirements will change over time. My jobs, when I left IT, when I left Palo Alto Networks, I was a systems engineer covering a relatively large territory. On Monday, I'd go on a plane. I'd fly every day during the week. On Friday, I would fly home. And this would happen for years and years and years. I probably spent a good 20 years of my career just flying around on airplanes all the time. So I would rarely get to see my family during the week. I'd spend all my time on the weekend to see my family. Now that we got a method down, a system down where that would work for us. The revenue was good. I made sure to spend time with the family on the weekends, and we kind of had a nice trade-off for that. But eventually, you don't want to fly around so much, and you like to spend more time at home. So you now get to make a decision. Now let's take a job where I don't travel as much, and I can spend more time locally. Well, the flexibility is there in IT for you to make those decisions. I was speaking with an associate. I was working with them out of Atlanta. And this guy worked in an organization. It was a big organization with a lot of IT folks. And he is sharp guy. Occasionally you'll meet up with a tech and they're just 100% on. That wasn't always the case when we would meet with people, but he knew the technology. And we would have great conversations about this because he was so into the technology and I was so into the technology. We just have great conversations. And I asked him one day, I said, your skills are such that you could go work for a manufacturer and maybe make twice as much of what you're working here. And he said, yes, but that would mean I'd have to travel around during the day. I'd have to be there at a certain time. I would have to work until a certain time. Sometimes there are meetings afterwards and at dinners. But I have certain things at home where I need that flexibility. Sometimes I come in at 10 and sometimes I come in at 7. And this job allows me that flexibility to be able to set the schedule that I need for the things that I'm doing at home and the requirements that I have for my family, which I absolutely respect 100% and thought that's the secret. You find the job that fits what you would like to be able to do because the jobs are out there. And because your skills in IT are so well honed, an employer would love to give you that level of flexibility. You just tell us when you want to work. This happened to be, I don't want to call it a government or state and local, but it was very similar to that. So they were flexible with the times, which fit his lifestyle perfectly. And he was happier with the flexibility than he was with the paycheck. Well, great. That's a win-win in my book. So that's a really good example, I think, that you can find the job that fits well for you. You can find the process that fits well with your life. And these things might change over time. But I think that's a really good way to use the flexibility of IT to do what you and your career would like to do rather than letting the job dictate that for you. Now, are there still parts of jobs that are not great? I mean, there are times when I've been on a plane that's been delayed and I've been sitting there and I get home, the plane lands at 2 in the morning and I still have to get to the hotel and try to get enough sleep so that I can still go back and do other things. Those were bad nights. Those were not great days the next day. But you sort of just get used to those things. There is an upside. In my particular case, the upside was financial because those types of jobs tend to pay very well. So I was able to bring in enough money to be able to kind of get this craziness going. And eventually I was investing my week so that I could do things on the weekend to build the training courses that ultimately would create this video series. So see how all that fits together? And it can be the same puzzle for you. You can fit those puzzle pieces together in a way that makes sense for what you're trying to do. So I would absolutely recommend doing that. Let's see other questions that are in the chat. I may have to scroll up just a little bit to get those. Ms. AK says, I got my ITF Plus, that is the foundational technology cert from CompTIA. Failed the 1001 twice. Should I keep going for the 1001, 1002, or switch to studying the 1101, 1102? My school issues vouchers. Can vouchers be switched? So those are two different things. Let's talk about both of them because they're both important. If you are still working on the 1001 and you haven't even got to the 1002 yet, you're out of time. There's really no other way to say it. There's no more time left. So no, I would not recommend you continue down the road of the 1001, 1002 because on October the 20th, they both disappear. And there's just not enough time left to be able to do that. So that's not going to work for you. What I would recommend is shifting to the 1101 and 1102 almost exclusively at this point, unless you have already been studying, unless you know you'll be able to get both exams done by October 20th. And remember, it takes a couple of months minimum on average for each one of these. You're just out of time. So I would say no, don't keep going with the 1001. Don't keep going with the 1002. In fact, I'm going to pull up some statistics for you just to kind of show folks a very interesting set of stats on the 1001 and 1002. I'm going to bring up the 1101 and 1102 stats. What's interesting about this is how many of the statistics have changed on the 1101 and how they have changed. So I have a spreadsheet that lists out every single objective in the exam. So let me put myself there. There we go. So the total number of objectives on the 220-1101 is 392. This, by the way, is 173 fewer than the 1001. That's right. The 1101 exam actually smaller than the 1001 exam. Already you should be, that's interesting. This could be less studying for the 1101. It could be. Now, there are new objectives on the 1101. 110 of those 392 are new. So it's not that you've already studied too much. You've still got to go back and study more. But 28% of the exam is brand new. That's almost 30% of the exam. That's a lot. So that's why I tell folks the 1001 might actually be a pretty good move. And one of the things people tended to complain about on the 1001 is that there was a lot of memorization, a lot. Now, obviously, a certification exam is going to have some memorization on it. You can't get away from that. And I think what CompTIA did on this latest version, the 1101, is they tried to take away a lot of that rote memorization and limit how much of that you would have to do. And I think they were pretty successful by that. For example, if you were on the 1001, you're probably familiar that you had to go through understanding what a thin client was like, what a CAD CAM device was like, what a NAS or SAN would look like, what a virtualization client would look like. None of those are in the 1101. They're just not there. So it's a good example of things they got rid of and put into this mix. So that's why I tell people it might not be a bad idea to go get the 1101, because there might be fewer things you might have to memorize. They're really not might be. There are fewer things that you have to memorize. It's just right in there. So that's really useful. And so make sure you're familiar with everything you need to know. So I would recommend shifting gears, but that also means you need to get an updated set of books, an updated set of course notes, an updated set of exams, all of those things. So it's important. Should I skip the ITF plus and go straight to the A plus? I would say most people do. Most people do skip the ITF plus, and most people do go directly to the A plus. I think it's mostly because employers are often asking for the A plus, and not a lot of people really ask for the ITF plus. Some do, and you'll need to look at the job postings in your area to see just what the importance might be for the ITF plus. Let's see what else is here in this list of things. Oh, the other question, the follow-up to that was that, well, what about my vouchers? Because I have vouchers for the 1001 and 1002. What about that? Actually, you don't. You have A plus vouchers. There's technically no such thing as a 1001 voucher, a 1002 voucher, an 1101 voucher, or an 1102 voucher. It seems like those are 4 different vouchers. They're not. It's one voucher. It's an A plus voucher. And I know if you go to the CompTIA website, the Pearson VUE website, I know they are listed and categorized as different voucher numbers. But the reality is, it's the same voucher. So someone could hand you a voucher that says, oh, I bought a 1001 voucher, here you go. But really what they're saying is, I bought an A plus voucher. You can use that for any A plus exam, either the old one or the new one. It works on all of them. So if you have 2 vouchers, you could use those 2 vouchers for any 2 A plus exams, period. That's it. That's it's weird on the website that they break them out that way, but I think that's so people can find what they're looking for. But it's not limited to those versions. It's any version of any A plus exam. If you have an A plus voucher, you got an A plus. You got an A plus exam voucher. You're good. You are good. Let's see what other questions here. I'm kind of at the top of the hour. I want to get maybe one more in. This is a question that came up recently. I saw this someone who was doing this who was taking both exams on the same day, and I will tell you, probably don't want to do that. Both exams are very different in scope. They're very different in topics. There's very little overlap between the 2 exams. So I would recommend, if you are studying for these exams, study for one of them, take the exam for one of them, pass that exam for one of them. Then shift gears to the other one. Don't study on the other one until you're done with the first one. Then concentrate on everything relating to the next exam. So that's why I would highly recommend that you focus on one at a time. Don't try to do both of them at the same time or on the same day. Well, this brings us to the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for being here. We've got another one of these study groups coming up on Monday. That's 2 days from now. This Saturday study group, a rare one, but we were able to get through it, I think. Come on back on Monday. We're going to do 1102 questions. They're all brand new again. and they're all ready. I've already built them. They're ready to go. We'll do it on Monday at noon Eastern. We'd love to see you back here for this. Thank you, chat room, for being here for the first hour. Thank you for your questions in the second hour. We could not do this without you, and we really appreciate your help and support. Remember to click the thumbs up button if you like this video. We'd love it if you would also subscribe to the channel. All of the things that help keep the lights on here, and it's something you can do for free to help us out. We sure appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everybody.